Welcome to Corporate Competitor, presented by Forbes Books. This is the podcast where executives share how the lessons they learned playing sports shaped their leadership. With me for today's episode is Cameron Janes, Chief Operating Officer at REI, where he oversees the co-op's $3.7 billion in annual sales across more than 190 stores, including the one here in my hometown of Tallahassee, where our son seems to spend all of his money. Before joining REI in 2022, Cameron spent 14 years at Amazon, leading innovations like Prime Video, Kindle devices, and the Just Walk Out physical store technology. Cameron's leadership was shaped by his experience as a collegiate rower at Brown University, which I'm excited to learn more about today. Now, make sure to check out corporatecompetitorpodcast.com/notes for my favorite quotes and reflection questions to help you apply today's insights.
Those elements of working together and helping people overcome obstacles and arguing through things and then getting them right and then understanding, hey, I can't be here today. My kid's got a football game or my kid's got a soccer game or I got to go to a parent-teacher conference. Can you fill in for me and cover this thing? And all right, I'll meet you. I'll get on the phone with you at 9 p.m. and we'll talk through it then. And or, someone gets sick, let me step in for you and help out. Like all those things create a team.
Before we continue, I want to remind you that if one of your 2025 goals is writing a book, but you don't know where to start, I'm here to help. In my new role as publisher at Forbes Books, I'm working alongside a world-class team to guide aspiring authors like you through the process of getting published. Whether it's a story, a big idea, or a project close to your heart, now's the time to make it happen. Just visit forbesbooks.com/Don to get started. Cameron, thanks for joining us.
Well, hey, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to have this conversation. I haven't talked about some of this stuff in a very long time, and let's dive in.
That's awesome. I know you don't do podcasts often. As part of our research, we always try to seek out things that other people have done, and there's not a lot of Cameron in the podcast world. So I'm grateful that you're going to offer your time, wisdom with our audience today. But your journey is actually wonderfully full circle. You grew up in the Great Northwest. Your dad was a park ranger, and now you hold an executive role at REI, where your goal would be, like your dad, to have people outside as much as possible, right? But early, you had a great passion for hiking, camping, cycling, and I know those had to have shaped your career. How did they shape your career?
Yeah, it is a really interesting full circle for me. I feel incredibly fortunate to be at REI now. It used to be the place for my family. It was kind of our base camp every weekend when we would go out on adventures. But when I was younger, I tried all the traditional sports, like soccer, tennis, baseball, basketball, and I was good at none of them. And, my mom and dad were kind of outdoorsy types. My dad was definitely not the guy who was going to coach the baseball team. He instead would take me out to snowfields and throw me down them so I could learn how to self-arrest with an ice axe and do stuff like that. So sports were not really a thing for me until about the age of 12. And when I was 12, I saw this movie, American Flyers, which is, I don't think it was very successful in the long run of things, but it was about professional cycling back then, the Coors Classic, and cycling just captivated me. I don't know why, but something just clicked, and I said, I want to go become a bike racer. And so I joined a team, and before I knew it, I was racing, and then I won the very first race I ever entered. I was like, whoa, okay. And so then I was fully hooked. I was the Washington State 12-13 boys men's road race state champion. And after that, I was hooked. I was like, all right, I'm in. And so, I just loved everything about cycling. And so for the next 3-4 years, I did nothing but race my bike. I traveled, Washington, the Western states. I was shaving my legs. I had a food diary. I had a training diary. I was just 100% all in. I went to the national championships on the road and track. And that was it. I was going to be, in my mind, a pro cyclist. Right. And then just like that, when I was 16, I burnt out. And I said, enough. It was one of those things where I was on the road 3 out of 4 weeks, I think. I was like traveling all the way down to Southern Oregon or California, big long car rides. I'd crashed my bike twice, ruined 2 frames. A disc wheel flew off the roof. I got in an argument with my coach. And so I just quit. This is what I'd done, everything. And I just quit. And so I went from riding my bike 7 days a week to not riding at all. And actually at that point, I didn't really pick up a bike again for like 15, 20 years after that. And so, but the thing that happened, this is kind of this moment in my life where you look back and you're like, whoa, that was just really this incredible shift. The one person who was really excited about me quitting bike race was my mom, because she had gotten my brother into rowing. She just loved rowing. To this day, she still loves rowing. She's done it. My stepdad has become a coach at times, but she's like, Cam, you should go get into rowing. So I'm going to sign you up for a learn to row class. And so that summer before my junior year in high school, I did a learn to row class. I was brand new, could barely do anything with it. And I went from that class, and then the fall, I became the stroke of the varsity boat for the local team I was on. And then later that year, I was back at the national championships in a different sport with a different team. Now, we didn't win anything. Some folks on my team did, but I just got, it just overnight, just switched my passion from one thing to the next. And, it was a combination of what I learned in bike racing, the early discipline there, and rowing, and just amazing amount of luck along the way, that I believe like really set me on the trajectory to be where I am today.
What do you think you learned in that ability to be all in one space, and then literally realize, you know what, that enough of that, and all in? What has that taught you that's been advantageous for you as a professional?
Well, I think some of it is just, it was the thing that I think my coach was the one who said, hey, I'm going to take you from learn to row and put you in this really important position in our lead boat. And I think what she saw in me was just this discipline and competitive drive, desire to be great, willing to work hard, willing to show up, right? And those things just translate kind of in almost whatever you're doing, right? And I'll be honest with you, I didn't have that until all of a sudden I got into cycling. I would sit in the baseball field and I can remember being like, what am I doing here? Right. And then all of a sudden something just clicked for me. I found my calling, and then I was able to switch that to rowing, and that same energy and that passion was, for me, it was the camaraderie, it was the teamwork. It was just the opportunity to compete that just found something inside me. And I find that, when I'm at work too.
You used a phrase there, that your coach saw a willingness to show up, right? One of the great lines in sports is that the most important ability is availability, right?
Yeah.
That if you want to try to look at what it means to be valuable in a team environment, showing up, being there,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
How do you pass that on as a leader today at REI? How do you pass that on to others? The importance of just showing up.
It's hard I think you have to create a reason for people to show up. Right. I really do. Like, work is hard. And if you're not inspired while you're doing it, it's even more hard. Like I've been in jobs, everyone's been in a role where they're like, gosh, the work we're all doing generally is hard these days. It's dynamic marketplace. Work is changing. It's always going to be hard, usually. But it's infinitely more hard if you're not inspired while you're doing it. And so I think you got to give people inspiration. And I'm not sitting here saying like, hey, I'm the most inspiring people, but you look to like, what's the inspiration in the company or in the work you're doing? So like at REI, we exist to help people get outside and, and fight for the outdoors. And so that to me is incredibly inspirational. And that's when I'm working with my teams and at REI, like that's what we talk about. Like, that's why we're here. We're not just doing retail. We're getting people outside. We're helping them change their lives. Like being outside changed my life for me. It's a big part of who I am. It's a big part of my family. It's a big part of, the family I grew up in. And that, to me, that's inspiring. And I think for a lot of people at REI, that's inspiring. And so like in other contexts, what's inspiring for you? When I was at Amazon, a lot of the inspiration that I pointed to was, hey, we are changing the way people live, right? Like early on in Amazon, I was really involved in the digital video business, and we took it from, it's all these DVDs to like, hey, you're going to be able to watch this anywhere at any time. And we fundamentally were changing the way people interacted with video entertainment. And like, that was inspiring to me, like changing the way people work or live. And so you just got to find inspiration in what you're doing. And I think if you find the inspiration, then people are going to want to show up if they share that inspiration with you. And if they don't, then that's the right sign that they're not doing the right thing or they're not at the right place.
Yeah, and I think that's an important piece of the equation, is that sometimes it's about if what is the inspiration of the organization doesn't align with your personal inspiration, then
100%.
It really doesn't matter how inspiring the organization is. You're just not on the right. You're not in the right boat.
Yeah, and sometimes people, they come to that realization, and that's when they're like, yeah, it's time to move on to the next thing. So that's how I think about that.
So is there an example in Amazon, REI, somewhere where you would say decisions you made to hire and grow and invest in the growth of the people around you, you've seen it have, you've seen the Boathouse elevate?
I can think back to each of the teams I've led or I've been on, and just feeling like, for me, it was a quest to have the right people in every seat. And knowing the feeling of when you have the right people in every seat, the dynamic of the team evolved and gelled and such that everyone's work, even when we were doing hard things, started to feel a bit easier, started to feel more achievable, and the confidence of people knowing that, oh, this person's they're really good, they're going to get there, like that kind of shared sense of responsibility that is required in a team kind of elevated up.
For many who might not be as familiar with rowing, and I wasn't until I started studying some of this for leadership lessons, right? I was trying to take leadership lessons from rowing. Is that many people kind of look at a boat and you think everybody's kind of doing the same thing. But the truth is, you used the phrase a second ago that you want to make sure everybody's in the right seat. In a boat, right? You got, let's say, an 8. You have people that, while they are, you want certain people in certain places based upon skill set, size, strength, whatever it might be. Can you explain a little of that, maybe, and how?
Yeah, it's been a while, so I'm sure rowing contemporaries may, but 8 seats in an 8, you start at the kind of always, you have to reverse yourself. So the front, the first seat, and the pointy end of the boat going down the course, that's 1, and 8 is the very back next to the coxswain, right?
Right.
And so the 8 seat and the 7 seat, the 8 seat's called the stroke, and the responsibility of the stroke is to set the pace in terms of, strokes per minute, the count, right? How fast you're going, and the rhythm of the boat. And that's a very important position in an 8, because everyone behind you is following you and your pace and your count. And the 7 seat that sits right behind that is kind of your pair in making that happen, because you got to win, in an 8 where you're rowing sweep, you got 1 oar, they're your counterpart on the other side. And so the 2 of you, 7 and 8 seat, are really setting the pace for the 6 rowers behind you. And then typically row seat 6 through, 6, 5, 4, 3, kind of call that the engine room. And those are the rowers who are just strong, right? And they're there just to apply the power. Now they have to be good in a great boat. The engine room is not just a bunch of people who don't have form. They still have great form, but they are strong, right? And that is their job fundamentally. And then the front 2 seats, the bow seat and the 2 seat, that is for whatever the dynamics of Big 8. Those 2 seats are incredibly important as it relates to the balance of the boat. And also, you think about it, they're pretty far away from those first two seats, the stroke. And so they've got to hold it all together in terms of making sure everyone's together and keeping the boat well balanced. Because for just the dynamics of rowing, that like those two seats are incredibly important in terms of keeping it all together. And so, you might have a big, super huge, rower in the middle. You generally don't see those huge rowers at the very pointy end of the boat. That's where you see kind of generally the smaller people who are really great at form and can help kind of keep it all together. And so, yeah, everyone's got kind of a slightly different role. And it all has to work together. And, that is, I've never been a rowing coach, but that is like the essence of coaching and rowing, which is finding the right person for the right seat. And they
which
move
is
them
such
all
a
around
perfect, which is such a perfect analogy for a business leader, right?
Yeah.
I mean, your job, as you said, your job is to look at the team you have at REI and say, am I taking full advantage of your talent? Am I putting you in a place where you could be most successful because that will allow me to be most successful?
Yeah, you could have 8 really, really strong rowers. If they're not in the right seats, they could be beaten. Excuse me. They could be beaten by 8 rowers who are not as strong.
Yeah.
But who are in the right places and rowing better together than rowing kind of as individuals.
I love it. When you accepted your role at REI, one of the things that I read was that you shared that you were excited about applying everything you learned at Amazon in a new context and culture. And Amazon obviously is a culture all to itself. But is there a lesson you could teach us about how you knew that you might have pushed too far too fast? Is there somewhere where maybe a story that you might share where you might say, and in this case, I realized I had to back off a little bit. Maybe I was taking it a little faster than maybe the organization was ready.
Yeah, well, I'm fortunate that people here at REI are pretty vocal. So, and I've got some people who are not afraid to, tell me the truth and speak to me. And there's a couple times, maybe when we're talking about, people, or we're talking about, like one of the things I think that happens is sometimes people, process and culture gets kind of intertwined in people's mind. And I'm pushing I'm like, that's process. That's not culture. Like the way we do that, that's not part of our culture, but like, it feels like it's part of our culture, and like not recognizing the perception there of trying to push this specific thing. Like we got to change this now. Well, that process, like maybe it's like an HR process, like, and like people really hold it close and dearly, or they're just used to it. And then they're, in their minds, that's part of the culture at REI. And you're like, no, that's process. Like that process can't be changed. It is not inherently part of who we are and what we are. We can do a different process and apply our culture to it. That process will be better. It will be more equitable. It will drive better outcomes. But if you're pushing on it and it feels like culture to them, you gotta slow it down, right? You gotta slow it down
because the culture is so important there.
Yeah, right. And I think, and by the way, I think culture is important everywhere. It's not just important at REI, and the transition from Amazon to REI really highlighted that for me, right? Because the culture really is kind of, it is the context in which everything happens and how it's set up. And, you have to, it can be an incredible enabler in some ways. It can be an inhibitor. And that was true at both Amazon and REI in different ways for different things.
Totally. When you're on a sports team, one of the 2 words that are most valued often are the words "great teammate." Right? If you want to have great teammates around you, you want to be a great teammate. It's often mentioned, but I'd argue it's just as important in business. Right? What does it mean what does it look like to be a great teammate at REI?
Well, I tell my team all the time, business is a team sport, right? It's not an individual sport. And, at the co-op, we articulate our values through what we call the co-op way. And it's a list of our values and behaviors that we expect from everyone at the co-op. And if I think when you're taught, in terms of being a teammate, I think there are 2 values I think about in that list that I think are really relevant when you talk about teamwork. And the first one is also like my favorite value of all of them, which is we go further together. And it's basically about, working together to achieve something beyond what you can achieve individually, right? You were talking about, like that's the essence of teamwork. And we are a co-op after all. And so to me, that is just core to a successful team and the definition of teamwork. Like I said, I think business is not an individual sport. Business is a team sport. And when you put the team ahead of yourself and you achieve great things together, you can go further together. And so when we're working well at the co-op as a team, all of our stakeholders win. Our members win, which is really important to us, our employees, the business itself, and then the communities that we're focused on operating in and helping out. There's one more value I think is also pretty relevant, which is we are all responsible for the co-op's results, right? And I think in a team, everyone has to contribute to achieve, like REI, everyone has to contribute to achieve the co-op's goals. And the same goes well for a well-functioning team, right? Everyone's got to contribute. And everyone, when people know their roles and can deliver against those responsibilities, like they feel fulfilled and you get great outcomes. And so that's, to me, like if you are at REI and you're doing, we have other values too, for sure. And those are all important. But when you're thinking about teamwork, if you're doing those two things well, like you're showing up as a great teammate at REI.
I love it. Let me flip the question just a little and talk a little deeper about employees. And many of our listeners, one of the things we know is that many of them are leaders. And one of the things we hear from them is that they often want to foster healthy competition within their teams in a way that inspires individuals to elevate themselves, right? Make the best of themselves rather than tearing down others, which unfortunately is what happens in too many competitive environments. What advice would you give to leaders who are trying to inspire individual ambition? You want people to make the very best of themselves, and at the same time, balance that with team unity, right? And what leader have you seen do that best in your career?
In terms of how to do it, I think about a couple things. First, team players always put the team first, right? So even when trying to foster, competition, drive the competition you're talking about, always put a value on the team succeeding over individuals, right? I think the counterpoint to that in my mind is never reward an individual accomplishment that comes at the expense of the team. Right? That just sends the wrong message, right? And I think, there's this kind of, I've seen, in the past, just reading and you see it in teams, like there's often happens like they'll like have a toxic or maybe like a semi-toxic, super high performer, right? And what do you do in that situation, right? That's a hard one to hack. I've had that on my team, right?
Yeah.
Like someone you're just like, oh, this person is amazing, but they are kind of semi-toxic, right? And
if I get rid of them, I'm going to lose them. I'm going to lose sales. I'm going to lose whatever, right?
Whatever it might be, right? That's really hard, right? So, and I think just like the third part around this kind of, this topic is you want to foster the teams first. If you want to get the most out of every individual, you have to recognize, highlight, and like celebrate outstanding individual contribution, right? So think about like in football, I'm watching this is the time of the year I watch a lot of NFL football, right? And they're always giving out game balls at the end of games. Now, when someone gets one, it does not take away anything from the success of the team, right? It's like, if anything, that team is pumped for that individual. They're excited. The team knows who is really delivering, right? So recognizing individual success inside the team is not demotivating to the team. It's motivating. It's motivating for the top performer, and it creates kind of a carrot for the other performers to target as well.
Right.
So you got to like focus on the team, recognize individual success, and not foster or encourage success at the expense of the team. I think if you're doing that, that's really good.
Yeah. So is there if you were to give game balls out in business, like how would you do that? And how do you do that in your environment? Like how do you recognize individual achievement and in a way to be inspiring.
Yeah. We have this thing on my team now. It was called the Blaze Award. So REI does lots of recognition. We have, as an entity and organization overall, we have what we call the Anderson Awards, which are named after our founders. And those are peer elected awards for certain levels of organization where peers elect and select. And it's really about peer recognition, right? It'd be like if the team was giving out the game balls, not the coach, right? So we have that, and that's fantastic. We have leadership awards that are more of a top-down recognition of some of our top leaders, right? And we as well. But then on my part of the co-op that I lead, we also created this thing called the Blaze Awards, and Blaze is I learned something new about the outdoors every week at REI. Blazes are those things when you're on a trail, they're those little markers that are telling you, like, when maybe the trail isn't super obvious which way it's going. They're like, they're kind of like stapled into trees or something like that. And those blazes are kind of trail markers that guide you to where you're going. So we created the Blaze Award, and we give it out across our team quarterly to individuals who we think are really demonstrating our values and driving change, driving high standards, and some of those things. And that's just another way we try to recognize individuals on our team who are leading us in the direction that we want to be going as a team and as a co-op. Like, recognition is important. It's ironic that I'm talking about recognition, because in my career, this is one of the areas that, I'm not always the best at. And certainly Amazon is not a place known for great recognition. So I did this, I did not learn that skill at Amazon. It's something I've had to focus on and work on a lot at REI. And our team gets excited about the Blaze Awards every year. We try, so it's I think just and then of course there's all the formal awards, but you really got to hey, great meeting. This is really what you guys did, a fantastic, those individual moments along the way also matter a lot too. And when people present to me at REI, it's, I don't feel like it's a big deal, but it feels like a big deal to them. They're talking to the CEO, they're presenting their work, and I try to be, and our team tries to be, we try to recognize and thank people for their hard work as much as possible. It is something that REI as a whole is very good at. And it's something I'm learning from the organization and try to get better at.
A question we've asked almost every guest over the 4 years that we've been doing this is that, a word that I think is too often overused in corporate speak these days is the word teams, right? We've used it a lot in our conversation today, but I think too often people are talking about their team when the truth is what they really are in charge of or leading are a group of individuals that just happen to have the same business card, right? That they're no closer to being a team. You've been on teams, obviously. You've been on successful teams. You know what it means to build a team. Now you're doing it as a leader there. What if you were coaching me, a young leader, on how to take a group of individuals and actually fashion them into something that could do something special, a team? What are the elements that you would tell me to focus on first to take a group of individuals and turn them into a team?
I think one of the things when I think about creating a team, I always think about creating a great team, right? And so for me, the first piece of advice I would give you or anybody was start with the right people, right? Hire, recruit, whatever you got to do, develop, support. You got to have great people to have a great team. You're only ever good as your team. We talked about this, and good teammates want to be on teams with other good teammates, right?
A players want to play with A players.
Right. Greatness attracts greatness, all of that. Right. And that just doesn't mean they've also got to be great people, all those things, the pieces have to fit together, right? I also think set a high bar. This goes back to people also right, in my mind, the right people are often attracted to the right challenges, with the right purpose and mission. And if you've got people aligned on a purpose and mission and they're the right set of people, and they've got a high bar for where they're going, great. And then put them to work, right? Let them develop shared experience. I really do not believe. I think like the one thing, like building a real team, like a true team of collective spirit, the one key ingredient is shared experience, right?
Yes.
It's time doing the work, it's collaborating, it's overcoming obstacles, achieving wins, working through the failures. Um, those are the moments where you learn each of your relative strengths, their weaknesses, where you shine, where you need help, like those kind of small moments that are like not about even work, but are about you, the person, the individual behind all of that. Only with that shared experience do I actually think you really get a team. You could have all the other ingredients, but until you go through something together, you're not a team. And like at Amazon, the annual planning process, I just was brutal. It was really hard. And it was a crucible. I call it like, it was like a crucible, right? Like you had to build your business plan, your strategy, you had to defend it, your financials, your prior year performance. And on the teams I was on, we were always presenting to the senior most leaders and often our CEO, right? Because we were always working on this stuff that was, always wanted to see it. So I was in front of the CEO there. So it was a multi-month process and it was super challenging and stressful. And I knew that if we weren't a team going into that, we were going to be a team coming out of it, right? And like,
or you'd be unemployed.
Well, fortunately, I was, that never happened to me there. But yeah, like, and like, but that crucible of going through that, you got to know the business better, you got to know each other better, and it's business, right? It's not, it's different from like sports where you're sweating it out and you might come away with some injuries or something like that, but those elements of working together and helping people overcome obstacles and arguing through things and then getting them right and then understanding, hey, I can't be here today, my kid's got a football game or my kid's got a soccer game or I got to go to a parent teacher conference, can you fill in for me and cover this thing? And all right, I'll get on the phone with you at 9 p.m. and we'll talk through it then. And or someone gets sick, let me step in for you and help out. Like all those things create a team.
Yep. It's funny, many teams that I've been on, and you too. I mean, as you said, wins and losses are awesome. Obviously, that's how you're often measured. But it's the experiences, it's the practices, it's the things you talked about earlier, right? Those are the things that 20 years later, when you're kind of reflecting on the experience, it's those shared experiences that you're going to hang on to most actively. Cameron, I am grateful for the opportunity to have learned. So I had more questions lined up. But I've taken so much from you. I've got pages and pages of notes here. Just I've scribbled on every piece of paper I've got on my desk. And I'm grateful for the time, the opportunity to learn from you. I thank you. I thank you today for being a corporate competitor with us.
Well, hey, thanks for having me on. Like I have not talked about some of this stuff in a long time, so it brings back some good memories. And I'm like I said, I was I was surprised and humbled when you're like, oh, we want to talk to you. You're you've got this competitive background. I'm like, well, I'm not like a superstar champion or anything like that. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it, and it's been a fun conversation.
Wow, that was so much fun. And now I'm sure I'll be a hero at home with my son and his REI spending habits. But so I want to talk about 3 great takeaways that I got from this conversation. The first was that entire lesson around the idea of the importance of showing up, right? The most important ability is availability. And as a leader, while that is their job, right? Those who work with us their job is to show up, to be available. But our job is to create a reason for them to show up. And a paycheck isn't the reason, right? That's quite transactional when you start doing that. I loved it when he said that REI exists to get people outside. So the real value, if you were working at REI, would be to be someone who wants others to go outside. The second great takeaway I got was the story with his college coach who had them out, practicing and going farther and farther away from the boathouse, and the idea that he was already at his own, he declared it his own low, the idea that he wasn't in the big boat, right, that he wanted to be in. He was now going further than he ever expected, and he knew how hard the work was going to be just to get back. And as he's struggling and he's not enjoying his time, the coach just flips that line in there. If you're going to dig a ditch, you might as well whistle while you're doing it. He said he wanted to strangle the coach, but the point would come to him years later that, as the coach was trying to say there, you need to find joy in what you're doing, especially when it's hard. And you need to go fight and look for hard challenges, because hard challenges position you to get the opportunity to do even more hard challenges, which is pretty awesome. And the third takeaway for me was that great line that he talked about when he was describing what it took to build a team, what it took to inspire the team to be careful, to take care of each other. Was he said, as a leader, we should never reward an individual accomplishment that comes at the expense of the team. Wow, what a great line, and what a great lesson, and how important that is for me to remind myself as a leader that I can't do that. What a fantastic day. Cameron was so inspiring to me. I hope you felt the same. I appreciate you. By the way, so one of the things that's striking me about doing this all on camera and stuff is, like, I can't drink my Diet Coke and things like that I'm used to doing. I mean, I would guess, right?